I dare you to fix me. I'm crossing the line again, falling on my knees.
Welcome to this channel. Hope you all are doing great and having fun in your life. Today we will have a discussion on an interesting topic: transgender laws in India. Origin of the word transgender. The term transgender was first identified in the writing of Dr. John F. Oliver of the Columbia University on sexual hygiene and pathology in 1965. Dr. Oliver used the word in his writing at parallels with the word transsexual, but earlier to it, in 1910, the German sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld used the word transvestite, and the reference that we get from the uses of the word by the Virginia Prince in 1970. In 1969, she used the term transgender. She used the word to put the difference between the transgender and transsexual. In 1974, the conference held in the University of Leeds, England, on the transvestite and transsexual, the difference has been categorized between the transvestite and transgender. But during 1990s, such difference was narrowed and marginalized and came under the single umbrella transgender. Transgender meaning was widened to fit all, including hijra, shaki, transsexual, non-binary, queer, and others. The term trans came from the Latin word mean across or other side. Important terms. To understand this subject in a more meaningful manner, we have to know the meaning of the following basic terms. A. Transgender. Child are born with a particular physical shape, and the doctor from the outer physique denote male or female child. Transgender are those whose gender identity differ from the birth gender record. Sometimes they are recognized as non-binary or genderqueer. B. Gender non-conforming. Gender non-conforming are those people who by birth are male or female, but they behave or think themselves opposite to the sex they have. C. Transsexual. Transsexual are those persons who change their sex to the opposite sex with the help of the medical treatment and surgery. The time span in which the change of sex takes place to the opposite sex is known as gender transition. Gender dysphoria. Some of the transgender persons suffer from the distress and agony due to the gender orientation, as it differs from the birth record gender. Such distress or agony in medical terminology called gender dysphoria. History of the transgender and the rights and movement. The existence of the trans or transgender can be traced from the writing of the ancient Greeks and Roman. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus gone through the sex change surgery and he preferred to be called as a lady. In Africa, the third gender plays the traditional part in their culture. In 1394, Eleanor Buchanan, a Briton, was arrested for sex work by dressing up as a lady. Such history of the presence of the transgender in the society continues, but the right for the third gender or transgender were not recognized. They remain in this society not as a part, but for fulfilling the social traditions. The movement of the trans started to put a mark in the last century. The demand of the trans was based on the principle of right to equality. The spark of the movement started to put mark in the second half of the last century. In 1952, with the hand of the Virginia Prince, transgender movement was initiated with the gay activist in 1959 at Los Angeles, known as Cooper Donuts Riot. Thereafter, in 1966, Compton Cafeteria Riot at San Francisco. In 1969, prevention of the event of the gay and transgender at New York erupted the famous Stonewall riot, where the notable activist Sylvia Rivera had played a pivotal role. Christine Jorgensen was accepted as the first transgender woman in US in 1952. Thereafter, in 1969, the movement of the transgender started to take the formal shape by forming the Gay Liberation Front by MP Johnson, Juju Nova and others. Johnson thereafter founded STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, along with the Sylvia Rivera. In 1990, the movement has spread across the globe and took the matured shape. As a result, the movement was marked in the various parts of the all continents. Let us now come to the focal point, that is India. The instances of the transgender can be traced in the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Even in the writing of the Patanjali, we get the reference of the transgender. So, the existence of the trans in the early Indian society was in form of the Hijra Shaki Kinnor. In the Vedic astrology, we get the reference of the Klip Griha, that is transgender planet, and also in the Puranas literature on art of dance and music as Kinnor, and other tools are male, that is Gandharva, and female, that is Apsaras. The British India has not recognized the rights and values of the transgender. Instead, the British authority look at them as other gender by passing of the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. By passing of the said act by the British India government has put them under scanner. Such force continues till 1952 when the act was repealed. In the meantime, the newly born nation Bharat, that is India, has already signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in UN. But the scenario drastically changed with the pronouncement of the National Legal Services Authority, that is NALSA versus the Union of India in 2014, whereby the transgender were given the equal rights under the Part 3 of the Constitution of India, as so the other citizens of the land. The transgender has been recognized as the third gender and the due care and protection under the law. In 2014, the private bill was introduced in the Rajya Sabha by Tiruchi Siva of the DMK. The said bill was passed by the Rajya Sabha on 24th of April 2015. The union government drafted its own version of the bill and introduced it by Vaijant Panda of the BJD, though the bill of the Tiruchi Siva was pending at that point of time. Again, the union government tabled the Transgender Persons Protection of Right Bill 2016 on 22nd of August. The bill was lagging far behind than that of the private bill of 2014, which caused a serious protest inside and outside the house. In 2018, the union government with 27 amendments tabled the bill but faces serious criticism both inside and outside the house and from the various front. At last, with the newer and fresh insertion and amendments, a new bill was tabled in the Lok Sabha on 10th of July 2019 and it was passed by the Rajya Sabha on 20th November 2019 and got the President assent on 26th of November 2019. It came as Transgender Persons Protection of Right Act 2019. Key features of the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. This act is divided into 9 chapters and 23 sections, and the objective behind the passing of this very act is to protect the rights of the transgender and to resist the discrimination. The act starts with the preliminary chapter dealing with the definitions. Thereafter, in the chapter 2, with the heading Prohibition Against Discrimination, the Act speaks about the various prohibition against discrimination in the section 3, such as denial or unfair treatment in educational institutions, healthcare services, in workplace or employment, use of any goods, accommodation, services, facility and opportunity, denial or discontinuation or unfair treatment in regard to the right to reside, right to movement, to hold public and private office, the denial of access to, removal or unfair treatment in government or private establishment in whose care the transgender person is. One of the most important part of this act dealt in the chapter 3 from section 4 to 7. It deals with the recognition of identity. Here the act speaks that the person have the right of self-perceived gender identity. and recognize oneself as a transgender. For the purpose of the identification, such person have to apply before the district magistrate in such a manner as the appropriate government may direct with proper documents. The district magistrate, as the issuing authority, shall follow the prescribed procedure in issuing of the certificate. On issuing of the certificate, such will be recorded in all relevant official documents. After issuing of the certificate, if a transgender person change his or her gender through the medical surgery, then the chief medical officer will have to issue a certificate to that effect. On the basis of the medical certificate, the district magistrate will change the record and issue a certificate of identity. From the name of the Act, it is clear that the Act is focused on the protection of rights and welfare of the transgender persons. Specifically, it deals in the Chapter 5 and 6 from Section 9 to 15 of the Act. The heads are 1. Non-discrimination in employment. 2. Obligations of establishment to provide facilities. 3. Grievance redressal mechanism. 4. Right of residence. 5. Educational institutions to provide inclusive education. 6. Vocational training and self-employment. And 7. Healthcare facilities. For the purpose of the upliftment and accelerate the development and address the grievances of the transgender person, the National Council for Transgender Person is established by the Act in Chapter 7 from Section 16 to 17. For the purpose of the protection and securities of the transgender persons and community against the force of bonded labor, denial of public rights, harm or injuries to the life and body, both economic and emotional abuse, the penalties has been invoked in the Chapter 8 in Section 19. Such penalties and punishment shall not be less than 6 months and extended up to 2 years with fine. The Chapter 9 confined itself with the miscellaneous powers which entrust the central government to make rules, provide grants, remove difficulties by issuing orders. Is the Act all-inclusive? No, the said Act of 2019 runs short when we look at the NALSA judgment of 2014 and from the day-to-day practical approaches. The shortcomings are 1. Self-recognition or self-identification, as one have to go through the procedural application before the district magistrate to get the certificate. The rules require the psychological report which goes against the judgment. 2. There is no provision in the Act where one can challenge the decision of the district magistrate. 3. The Act somehow, while asking for the proof of one's identity as a transgender before the district magistrate, hitting the question of right of privacy and dignity. 4. The penalty for the offences against the trans runs from 6 months to 2 years with fine is a big discrimination. In the matter of sexual assault, such as rape on the transgender person, the Act remains silent and fails to address the penal provisions. 5. Apart from the judgment of the NALSA, the term transgender remains excluded from the provisions of the various acts, which in turn affect the right of the transgender. 6. The Act failed to recognize person with intersex variation and genderqueer. 7. The Act remains silent while the question of reservation of the transgender person. The NALSA judgment speaks about the reservation.